Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone pounding on your door. Heart racing, you stumble to your feet, flick on the light, and peek through the peephole. Outside, a man stands drenched in sweat, his eyes wild with terror. "Please," he gasps, "they're coming for me. I have nowhere else to go." You hesitate. Something about him seems familiar. Then it clicks. He's the same man you saw on the news last night, accused of a horrific crime. Your mind splits in two. One part whispers, "Help him. He's human. He's afraid. Maybe he's innocent." The other part screams, "Lock the door. He's dangerous. He deserves whatever's coming to him." Now, pause. Really think. At what point does a person cease to be good? Is it when they make one devastating mistake? When they let fear outweigh their morals? Or does it happen so slowly, so imperceptibly, that by the time they realize, they are no longer who they thought they were? History is filled with good people who became monsters, not overnight, not by some grand, dramatic fall, but by tiny, almost unnoticeable compromises. The doctor who starts falsifying medical records to protect his job. The soldier who follows orders he once swore he never would. The kind neighbor who looks the other way as a crime unfolds just beyond their fence. No one wakes up and decides, "Today I will become the villain." It happens in whispers, in inches, in choices too small to notice until the reflection in the mirror is unrecognizable. And here's the real horror. The same process that turns men into monsters is working on you right now. Would you even know if it were happening? Would you recognize the moment when you cross the line? Or, like so many before you, would you only see it in hindsight, when it's far too late? There's a chilling paradox at the heart of human nature. The people who commit the worst atrocities are not always cruel, soulless beings. Many were once kind, hopeful, even loving. They believed in justice. They told themselves they would never be capable of evil. Yet something shifted, a pressure too great, a moment of weakness, a voice whispering that the ends justify the means. And in that moment, whether by choice or necessity, they stepped into the abyss. The question is not, why do bad people do bad things? That's easy. The real question is, why do good people let themselves become unrecognizable? And perhaps even more disturbing, would you know if it were happening to you? This isn't just a theoretical problem. It's not a riddle for scholars or a cautionary tale from history. It is a mirror held up to your own existence. Because if good people can become monsters, then how certain are you that you are immune? The answer lies deeper than you think. Let's go there. Think of the worst human atrocities in history: genocide, torture, betrayal, not committed by villains twirling their mustaches, but by men and women who in another life might have been ordinary, might have been you. This is where the real horror lies, not in the existence of evil, but in the terrifying ease with which it seeps into the hearts of the well-intentioned. So how does it happen? Carl Jung warned us about this long ago. He spoke of the shadow, the dark, unacknowledged part of the human psyche, the collection of thoughts, instincts, and desires we refuse to accept about ourselves. The more we deny it, the more it festers in secret. Most people tell themselves a comforting lie: "I am a good person. I would never do something terrible." But what happens when the circumstances shift? When survival is at stake? When the world forces you to choose between your morals and your safety? The truth is unsettling. Everyone has a breaking point. Even the kindest soul can be twisted by desperation. Even the most moral person can justify a small wrong, just this once, until small wrongs become a habit. Psychologists call this moral disengagement. It's the slow, systematic way our mind erodes the guilt of doing something we once thought was unthinkable. At first, it starts with justification, convincing yourself that this isn't really wrong. Then comes dehumanization, believing the other person deserves it. Next, diffusion of responsibility, telling yourself that you had no choice. And finally, habitualization, where the monstrous act becomes so normal you barely feel it anymore. Example: think of a soldier trained to kill. The first time he takes a life, his hands tremble, his stomach twists. But by the 10th time, the guilt dulls. By the 100th, he doesn't even flinch. This isn't an exaggeration. It's how the human mind adapts. And it doesn't just happen on battlefields. It happens in workplaces, in relationships, in ordinary life. Have you ever done something you swore you never would, justified it, excused it, told yourself it wasn't that bad? That was the process at work. And here's the worst part. It doesn't take an extreme situation to start this spiral. It just takes a small compromise, a single act that betrays your integrity, a moment where you silence the voice in your head telling you something isn't right. That's how it begins. Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote, "Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. If you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." This is not just poetic philosophy, it is a stark warning. The more you engage with darkness, the more it becomes a part of you. Take a person who despises injustice. They see corruption in the world, and it infuriates them. At first, they protest, they speak out, they fight for change. But over time, their anger hardens. They begin to believe that justice requires extreme measures. They start to justify acts they once condemned. If the other side is corrupt, why shouldn't we be ruthless too? They become obsessed with destroying the enemy, forgetting what they originally stood for, until one day they wake up and realize they have become the very thing they once swore to destroy. The abyss has looked back. This is not a theory. It is a pattern. It has played out across revolutions, ideologies, and even personal relationships. The abused child who grows up to become an abuser, the righteous leader who turns into a tyrant, the victim who becomes the oppressor. We like to believe we are different, that we are immune. But the only thing separating us from that fate is awareness. So, what do you do with this knowledge? If every person has the potential to descend into darkness, how do you recognize the warning signs before it's too late? The answer is hidden in what comes next. You don't notice it at first. It begins with a small shift, something so subtle, so seemingly insignificant that it barely registers. Maybe you let a lie slip because the truth feels inconvenient. Maybe you stay silent when you should speak up because the cost of honesty feels too high. And then something inside you changes, not all at once, not in a way that's immediately obvious. But if you were to step outside yourself and observe from a distance, you'd see it. You'd see how the hesitation grows, how the justifications multiply, how the version of you that once prided itself on being good starts making room for things it never would have tolerated before. And that's the most terrifying part. Not that people turn into monsters overnight, but that they never realize when the transformation is happening. Society sells you a myth that good and evil are separate, clearly defined, that monsters wear their wickedness like a badge, obvious and grotesque, that you would know if you were becoming one of them. But that's the lie. The reality is far more insidious. The real danger isn't waking up one day as a villain. The real danger is the slow erosion of self-awareness, the way the mind bends and adapts, whispering, "This is fine, this is normal, this is necessary, you've seen it before." The ambitious employee who starts cutting corners, convinced it's just playing the game. The politician who compromises his values for power, telling himself it's for the greater good. The person in an abusive relationship who starts believing, "Maybe I deserve this." The group that once fought oppression becoming the oppressors themselves, believing it's justice. None of them set out to lose themselves. None of them planned to become unrecognizable, but step by step, decision by decision, they did. Once you start down this path, something dangerous happens. Your identity reshapes itself to accommodate your choices. Cognitive dissonance ensures that the mind does not tolerate contradiction for long. If your actions don't align with your morals, you will either correct your actions or rewrite your morals. And for most, the second option is easier. I wouldn't normally lie, but in this case, it was necessary. I'd never betray someone I care about, but they deserved it. I still believe in kindness, but the world is cruel. I have to be crueler. Bit by bit, the mind justifies every new compromise, and the further you go, the harder it becomes to see yourself clearly. Because the greatest trick of the descent is this: it doesn't feel like you're changing at all. Until one day you hear your own words, see your own reflection, and feel a jarring realization: I don't recognize myself anymore. But let's say you don't notice. Let's say you continue. What happens next? On the surface, maybe nothing at first. Life moves on. You still wake up, go to work, talk to friends. But deep inside, something festers. You start feeling disconnected from people, from emotions, from yourself. Guilt turns to numbness. Numbness turns to emptiness. You begin rationalizing even greater compromises, because once the line has been crossed, where does it end? The respect of others diminishes, not because they always see what's happening, but because the energy of deception, of moral erosion, leaks into everything you do. Worst of all, you start feeling trapped, because the deeper you go, the harder it is to admit the truth, that you were wrong, that you abandoned your principles, that somewhere along the way you lost something precious, and you don't know how to get it back. Most people don't recognize their descent until they've crossed the point of no return, until they've burned bridges, shattered trust, and become the very thing they once despised. But the truth is, there is always a way out. The problem is that few are willing to face it, because the path back demands something most fear above all else: brutal self-confrontation. Are you ready for that? Because if you are, what comes next will change everything. Imagine standing at the edge of a deep chasm. On one side, where you are now, is the slow, unconscious slide into becoming something you never intended. On the other side is the version of you that remains uncorrupted, untamed, unbroken. The version of you that still remembers what it means to be whole. The question is, how do you get across? Most people never do. They tell themselves comforting lies. I haven't changed that much. I'm still the same person. But deep down, they know the truth. They just can't face it, because the journey back demands something terrifying: the willingness to confront the monster within. And yet, that is exactly what you must do. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means something simple, yet profoundly difficult. If you want to reclaim yourself, you must look directly at your own darkness. Most people avoid this at all costs. They shift the blame, rewrite their history, make excuses for their worst moments. But here's the uncomfortable truth: you cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You must ask yourself, where have I compromised my integrity? What lies have I told myself to justify my actions? How have I ignored the warnings from my own conscience? Who have I hurt in ways I refuse to admit? And here's the hardest part: you must be brutally honest. No softening, no sugarcoating, no, but I had no choice. Because the moment you do that, the moment you truly see yourself without illusion, the grip of unconscious transformation begins to loosen. You can feel it, can't you? The weight of all those silent justifications starting to shift, the uncomfortable awareness creeping in. This is the first step back to yourself. But it's not enough to see the monster within. You must now choose to fight it. Once you've seen where you've gone wrong, the next temptation is to drown in guilt, to let shame paralyze you. But guilt is useless if it doesn't lead to change. This is where most people fail. They wallow in self-loathing, but they do not act. Don't fall into that trap. Instead, ask yourself, what is one thing I can do today that aligns with my highest values? What wrongs can I begin to make right? What part of my old self, the one I lost, can I reclaim? The world will tell you it's too late, that once you've crossed a line, you can never return. That's a lie. The truth? Integrity is a choice you can make at any moment. It doesn't matter how far you've fallen. What matters is whether you're willing to start climbing back up. The greatest mistake people make is believing that avoiding darkness makes them good. But ignoring the monster within doesn't make you moral. It makes you weak. Real strength comes from confronting the monster and taming it. It means knowing you could lie, manipulate, or betray, but choosing not to. It means understanding that the potential for cruelty exists within you, but refusing to let it define you. It means standing firm in your values, even when no one is watching. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming the Übermensch, the one who transcends their own limitations, who forges their own path instead of being swept away by the tide. This is what Viktor Frankl meant when he said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Freedom is not found in pretending you are flawless. Freedom is found in mastering your own darkness. Look at your life, right now. Are there choices you've made that don't sit right with you? Have you betrayed your own values, bit by bit, without even realizing it? And more importantly, are you willing to change? Because here's the truth most people never accept. No one is coming to save you. No divine force, no perfect moment of redemption. Only you. Only your decision to face yourself, to take responsibility, to claw your way back to who you were meant to be. Most will never make that choice. They will remain blind, making excuse after excuse, drowning in a life that no longer feels their own. But some, the rare few, will see the abyss, recognize its pull, and step away before it swallows them whole. Will you be one of them? Or will you let the monster win? The choice is yours. But before you answer, there's one final truth you must hear, and it changes everything. You have spent your entire life believing that the line between good and evil is clear, that monsters are something other, something separate from you. But now you see the truth. The greatest danger is not the existence of evil. It is the illusion that you are immune to it. History has shown us this time and time again. It wasn't demons or devils who carried out the greatest atrocities. It was ordinary men and women. People who, in different circumstances, might have lived quiet, peaceful lives. But a shift in pressure, a moment of weakness, a slow erosion of morality, and suddenly they became something else. And here's what should terrify you the most. They didn't see it happening. They believed, until their final breath, that they were justified, that they were still the heroes of their own story, that they were simply doing what had to be done. And if they could believe that, despite the horrors they committed, what makes you think you would be any different? Carl Jung warned us that the most dangerous person is the one who believes themselves to be purely good. Why? Because they are blind to their own capacity for darkness. If you refuse to acknowledge your shadow, your ability to deceive, to betray, to destroy, then you have no control over it. You will be ruled by impulses you don't understand. making choices you can't explain, slowly becoming something you swore you never would. The only way to escape the fate of those who fell before you is to accept this brutal truth. The monster was never separate from you. It has always been there, and the moment you forget that, it takes control. Most people, when faced with this realization, panic. They want to shove it back into the darkness, pretend they never saw it. But that is the greatest mistake of all, because ignoring your capacity for destruction does not erase it. It only ensures that one day, when the right circumstances arise, you will act on it without understanding why. So what is the answer? It is not to fear your darkness, it is to own it. Recognize that you are capable of deception and choose to be honest anyway. Understand that you can betray others and commit to loyalty despite the temptation. Acknowledge your ability to destroy and instead dedicate yourself to creation. Because true strength is not found in pretending you are incapable of evil. True strength is knowing you could be a monster and choosing not to be. You are standing at a crossroads. To one side is the comforting lie that you are simply good, that you will never be capable of falling, that monsters are something other than you. If you take that path, you will continue as you always have, blind, vulnerable, at the mercy of forces within you that you refuse to see. The other path is harder. It requires you to strip away every illusion about yourself, to see with brutal clarity the parts of you that are selfish, fearful, capable of harm, and yet to take control of them, to refuse to let them dictate your actions. This path is not for the weak, but if you take it, you will never be manipulated by your own unconscious instincts again. You will never fall blindly into corruption. You will never become what you swore to fight against. Because the only people who are truly dangerous are the ones who have never looked in the mirror. Now the choice is yours. Will you have the courage to see yourself as you really are, or will you look away and let the transformation happen slowly, silently, until it's too late? Think carefully, because whether you realize it or not, the process has already begun.